Students, by now we have become well aware of the importance of friction. Friction is important in our daily life. Running, walking, playing, or even writing wouldn't have been possible if friction was not there. In other words, friction helps us in our daily life. Sometimes we need to decrease the friction, and sometimes we also need to increase the friction. And that is what we are going to learn today. We are going to learn how to increase the friction and how to minimize it. So let us begin. So our today's topic of discussion in friction is minimizing the friction and increasing the friction. And this is part number 2 of the lesson. In the last session, we had learned about what is friction, what causes friction, friction in daily life, and disadvantages of friction. So these were the 4 topics that we had learned in the last session. And today we are going to start with the new topic, that is minimizing friction. So how to minimize the friction? Since friction is due to roughness of the surfaces, any process that makes the contact surface smooth will reduce the friction. So it can be done by polishing the surface. Polishing a rough surface smoothens it and it reduces the friction. By lubrication, we can minimize the friction. Friction is decreased by lubricating surfaces with oil, grease, or graphite. The sliding surfaces then have a thin layer of lubricant between them. The friction is then between the surfaces and the lubricant layer, which is much less. Graphite is used as a lubricant in machines where the moving parts reach very high temperatures. Are there any other ways of minimizing friction? The answer is yes, by changing the shape, by streamlining to reduce fluid friction. Fluids such as water and air always exert friction on the objects moving through them. This frictional force that fluids exert on the object is called drag. It depends on the nature of the fluid, the shape of the object, and the speed of the object with respect to fluid. So this frictional force or friction, you can say, depends on the nature of the fluid. It might be air or it might be water. It depends on the shape of the object, and it also depends on the speed of the object with respect to the fluid. Students, friction is minimum for a streamlined shape, which is rounded in front and narrow at the back. Okay, so this is a streamlined shape. Okay, it is rounded in the front and narrow at the back. So you can see here, this is a narrower part, whereas this is rounded part. This is not a streamlined shape. This is spherical shape, whereas this is streamlined shape. So in streamlined shape, the front part is rounded, whereas the back part is narrow. Students, this particular discovery, you can say, which human realized in some point of time, but nature already knew this even before human beings. Okay, now we know that streamlined shape help us to reduce the friction, but nature knew this before human beings. Of course, nature is much smarter than human beings, because you can see it in nature. There are few animals like birds and fishes which have a streamlined bodies. And why do they have streamlined bodies? Because they have to move through fluids. Birds move through air, which is a fluid. Air is a fluid. And fishes have to move through water, which is also a fluid. And moving in a fluid in a proper manner requires a streamlined bodies. And nature have already given these animals a streamlined bodies. Here you can see this front part is rounded, whereas the back part is narrower. In case of fishes also, front is rounded and back part is narrow. So this is how nature has helped these birds and fishes by providing them a streamlined bodies, and that's why they are able to move smoothly through air and water. Let us see next point. The bodies of aeroplanes, missiles, rockets are streamlined to reduce the friction with air. So we human beings also, after realizing that streamlined objects has to face less friction, after realizing this, we changed the shape of certain vehicles like aeroplanes, missiles, rockets, which were discovered in after the industrial revolution. We realized that we have to make these bodies streamlined. Why? Because they have to move through fluids. Okay, so aeroplanes, missiles, rockets are streamlined to reduce the friction with air. And for that sake, even vehicles like cars and ships also, they are streamlined to offer less friction. So this is a picture of an aircraft where the front part is rounded and the back part is narrower. So bodies of aeroplanes and missiles I already told. Ships also have a streamlined shape to reduce friction with water. So you might have observed ships also. They have a narrower back ends, whereas front part is many times rounded. So this offers less friction. Now, there are other methods of minimizing the friction. For example, we can use wheels and ball bearings to reduce friction. When one body rolls over the surface of another body, the resistance to its motion is called as rolling friction. So these wheels offer a rolling friction, and rolling friction is always less than the sliding friction. So rolling reduces the friction. It is always easier to roll than to slide a body over another. For example, if this suitcase didn't had these wheels, then it would be difficult to carry it from one place to another. So that is the reason it is convenient to pull the luggage fitted with the rollers. Now that we know that rolling friction is smaller than sliding friction, sliding is replaced in most machines by using ball bearings. So this is an example of it. Okay, so there are ball bearings inside these motors so as to offer less friction. Common examples are the use of ball bearings between hubs and the axles of the ceiling fans and bicycles. So while repairing the fans or bicycles, you might have observed that in the motor there are these ball bearings which help us to reduce the friction. Now that we have understood how to minimize the friction, now we will be studying how to increase the friction, because there are more than one occasions where we need to increase the friction. So have you ever thought why the sole of your shoe is grooved? Or the tires that vehicles have, they are also well grooved, right? So treaded tires of car, trucks and bulldozer provide better grip with the ground. Similarly, the what we call the sole of the shoe, which is grooved, that also help us to get a proper grip of the road while running or playing. So these grooving of the shoes or treading tires of cars or trucks or bulldozers help to provide friction. They increase the friction. And why we need to increase the friction? Because if we don't do it during rainy season, if there is muddy area, these vehicles can slip on the wet road, and if we are running, then we might fall, because this wet area offers very less friction, which is not good for moving. Then we deliberately increase the friction by using brake pads in the brake system of bicycles and automobiles. When you are riding a bicycle, the brake pads do not touch the wheels, but when you press the brake lever, these pads arrest the motion of the rim due to friction. The wheel stops moving. This is how we can reduce the speed of the bicycles. Then while playing, kabaddi players rub their hands with soil. Why? To offer a better grip of their opponents. Okay, so that's why they rub the hands with soil so as to get the grip of their opponents. Then gymnasts also, they apply some coarse substance on their hands to increase the friction for a better grip, because the grip is very important in some kind of games. Well, that was all for today. We tried to learn how we can minimize and increase the friction, and we also learned various examples related to this increasing and decreasing the friction. Now it's time for some assignment questions. First question is, how can we minimize the friction? Explain any one method with example. I repeat, how can we minimize the friction? Explain any one method with example. सब एग्जाम्पल्स नहीं लेने, सब मेथड्स नहीं लिखने, सिर्फ एक मेथड लिखो अच्छी तरह से और उसका एग्जाम्पल देखिए। वेयर डू वी ऑब्जर्व स्ट्रीमलाइनिंग इन नेचर? नेचर में हमें कहाँ दिखता है स्ट्रीमलाइनिंग? सो आई रिपीट द क्वेश्चन, वेयर डू वी ऑब्जर्व स्ट्रीमलाइनिंग इन नेचर? थर्ड क्वेश्चन इज, हाउ कैन वी इंक्रीज द फ्रिक्शन टू अवॉइड स्लिपिंग ऑन द ट्रैक वाइल रनिंग? ठीक है, अगर हम भाग रहे हैं तो कहीं गिर न जाए, तो इसके लिए हम फ्रिक्शन कैसे बढ़ा सकते हैं? हाउ कैन वी इंक्रीज द फ्रिक्शन टू अवॉइड स्लिपिंग ऑन द ट्रैक विथ रनिंग, व्हाइल रनिंग? देन लास्ट क्वेश्चन इज, हाउ डू जिमनास्ट्स improve their grip? I repeat the question, how do gymnasts improve their grip? Well, that was assignment for today. I hope you will be able to answer the questions, but if you have any doubts, if you get any doubt, feel free to ask me at any point of time. So, see you in next session. Until then, take care. Bye bye.